Right, so for as much as the Lord Ali allegations mount up, now involved in buying MPs' houses apparently, as well as paying for birthday parties, and apparently having interest in a tax haven-based firm, and in addition to those claims, of course, there's been the donation of £20,000 for Keir Starmer's son to study quietly for his GCSEs, despite neither the dates nor the amount of that donation lining up with the correct time frame. As much as these are highly questionable scandals, there's been the whiff of these coming thick and fast to cover up the £4 million largest donation in Labour Party history that came from a hedge fund based in the Cayman Islands. And of course you wonder what that is paying for. That is the question that should always be asked where donors are involved in a donation of this size. And currently there are three issues which aren't getting enough coverage, where there has been too much focus on Starmer accepting clothes and revision space and everything else to do with that £4 million donation. For one, it very much appears that Labour's climate change policy has been sold out to this hedge fund, which represents significant interest in the fossil fuel industry. For two, Labour is now looking set to water down its plans to tax non-DOMs. And for three, there's the AI intelligence scheme. And you can't help but think that taking money from a tax haven-based hedge fund has got something to do with all three of these. Right, so the coverage of Labour's scandals under Keir Starmer across the Labour conference period has meant that conference has been nothing short of an unmitigated disaster for Labour. It's exposed the new government, the Starmer regime, of being no less morally ambiguous than the Tories. And the policy so far has represented no change either, just more of the same. The burden of dealing with Labour's alleged black hole just meant more austerity for ordinary working class people, despite Keir Starmer's claims that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the greatest share of that burden. Of course, when you boil down what Labour has actually done instead, it shouldn't be much of a surprise that they've turned out just like the Tories. When they take big donations just like the Tories, the policy being shaped by those coughing up the cash. Because nobody gives away their cash for nothing, and certainly not in the tens of thousands or even millions for purely altruistic reasons or out of the goodness of their heart. They're all buying something. Sure, whilst episodes like Lord Ali's numerous donations and involvement in the Starmer government has won the headlines, from right-wing Labour MP Siobhan McDonough's house to Starmer and his wife's clothes and glasses, to Bridget Phillipson's birthday party, to his involvement in a tax haven-based business venture not appearing on his Lord's Register of Interests, and more. And that's aside from the Lord Ali involved donor issues like the Studygate saga concerning Starmer's son's revision space, with neither the donation covering the cost of a month's rental of the property concerned, nor the rental period matching the GCSE exam cycle either. There's certainly been a lot to distract the public with, and sure, I'm guilty of covering these stories too. They are damning in their own right, they certainly do deserve coverage. But when another donation is going far less reported, and it is the matter of a £4 million donation from a Cayman Islands-based hedge fund, Quadrature Capital, you can't help but think somewhat lesser, but still egregious offences are being pushed to cover up for something much, much worse. And even though I have also covered this donation previously as well, the big question of why it was given, what were they buying, had not at that point been really answered. Sure, there were clues. We knew the company in question had interests in all manner of different industries, from arms manufacturers to fossil fuels to banking, some of the very worst of the worst. But now we've got three Labour policy announcements since this donation was made, during the election campaign as it was, but so that the Electoral Commission rules meant it has only now been declared, and which can be seen to directly benefit Quadrature's business interests, that I've been able to identify. Possibly the best covered of these, not that that is saying a great deal, as it is largely alternative media and political commentators discussing this more than the mainstream media are, has been the appointment of Rachel Kite to the previously scrapped role under Rishi Sunak of Government Climate Envoy. A somewhat surprising move from Starmer in a way, since we already know he doesn't really care about environmental issues, that GB Energy is a complete scam, and he publicly states he hates tree huggers amongst other things. So why do this? Why appoint a climate envoy again? Well, as I covered previously, despite having interests in the fossil fuel industry, Quadrature Capital also have a climate foundation, surprisingly, and I had trouble squaring that hole, insofar as how can Quadrature possibly give a toss about the environment whilst holding and obviously promoting fossil fuel industry assets? Of course, if it is all politics, if it is all for show, well, that would certainly explain a lot, wouldn't it? And if that is true, Labour appointing anybody linked to that would of course be par for the course as far as Starmer's own apparent environmental interests lean, or lack thereof. So the fact Rachel Kite also sits on Quadrature Capital's Climate Foundation board, in fact she's the co-chair, that should certainly raise some eyebrows, shouldn't it? £4 million in donations from Quadrature Capital, a tax haven-based hedge fund with interest in the fossil fuel lobby, whilst also maintaining a climate foundation which you find hard to believe they can possibly take seriously. And all of a sudden, their climate foundation co-chair is now Labour's climate envoy. For the climate or the fossil fuel lobby, which do you think was paid for? The second policy area is one the Financial Times has raised, which is an unexpected announcement to come from Rachel Reeves that she is going to water down plans now to tax non-doms more. This was a big thing during the election campaign, wasn't it? Labour were going to make the non-doms pay. Apparently all on the basis that no money would be raised is the excuse being given now. You'll have to forgive me. I know I'm just a former welder. Perhaps I lack the nous for this. But when you tax something, you raise taxes, do you not? That is money, isn't it? Usually used to offset government spending, sure, but it is still money. So in what sense will taxing these privileged, rich enough to afford to take out non-dom status to start with to avoid tax, which is the only reason they do it, not going to raise taxes, not going to raise any money? Does the FT explain? Not really. So do I smell a rat? Yes, a big, fat, tax haven-based hedge fund-shaped one. Apparently Reeves had hoped to raise some £1 billion from changes to taxation in regards to non-doms. I'm sure that is probably a realistic figure. But now the official line is that it will be watered down if the numbers now don't add up. Well, how convenient will it be if they now don't then? Add up to what? It'll be a positive figure, whatever it is, surely. There will be money raised, obviously. Surely that's obvious to everyone. So how can this not be? Explain, please. A faceless, anonymous government official apparently told the FT that they will be pragmatic and not ideological about this, which really does now start to sound a little bit shifty, doesn't it? And all after, of course, a big fat donation from a hedge fund based in a tax haven. You can't help but think, has this influenced Rachel Reeves' decision to back off taxing the rich more, taxing non-doms more, despite that being very much what Keir Starmer promised to do? The change he pledged to the country that isn't being delivered either. Non-doms will leave the country, wails the Financial Times. Is this why the numbers all of a sudden don't add up or won't add up? People who avoid their taxes will leave the UK. Well, by then, someone else will fill the void if they go. Hopefully they will pay their taxes. Why should we miss people who do not pay their fair share? We should not. Expect Reeves to ditch this. Accusations at Quadrature pay for this move will follow. Of that I'm sure. So much for making the non-doms pay. The third policy, I'm not sure anyone else has necessarily picked up on, but it is Keir Starmer's AI intelligence development and his plans for a £10 billion AI project based in Northumberland, according to The Guardian. Now, I know there's a narrative going around that this is actually Starmer taking credit for a Tory plan, and that I can well believe. The Tories themselves very fond of the donors themselves as well. They completely fund their party as well, which is why we call Labour these days under Starmer a bunch of red Tories, because they're being funded in the same way. But this one is all about foreign investment. The £10 billion is coming from outside interests. The Guardian misses the point in its coverage, fixates on one of the several hoped-for backers of this project, who is a chap called Stephen Schwarzman, who runs a private equity company called Blackstone. Schwarzman himself, having been a Trump backer, is what The Guardian fixates on, as if that wasn't bad enough. But where Blackstone is definitely on board, though, having apparently committed £110 million at this point to Starmer's AI project, other potential investors include Carlyle Group, which is another private equity firm, Global Infrastructure Partners, and the banks Macquarie, JP Morgan, Citigroup, and Bank of America. Now, I'm going to be looking at Carlyle Group, JP Morgan, and Citigroup most closely because just like Blackstone, financial interests to all of these are held by Quadrature Capital, according to investment research platform Fintel.io, at any rate. Schwarzman also happens to be a massive Zionist like Starmer as well, having announced $7 million in aid to Israel immediately after the night of October 7th via his Blackstone company. Labour has taken a huge amount of money from a tax haven-based hedge fund here. It is not getting investigated adequately. And if you compare investments to fingers in pies, Quadrature have more than 1,600 of them. These three items on their own, identified thus far as suspicious, by me at least, still doesn't feel like £4 million worth of favours. So how much more have we got to scrutinise? And is it going to be a case of everything a Starmer-led Labour government declares it's going to do, that it has to be compared to where they've had donations from? Because if so, we might just have the most bought and paid for government, most corrupt government, as that would be, that we've ever seen in this country. Meanwhile, as cuts to ordinary working class people are still being touted, the Treasury has had enough good news to fill that £22 billion financial black hole of theirs it still claims to have. Except austerity is still going to happen to us. Why is that then? Check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch to find out more. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.